All right, great pleasure to bring Senator Ted Cruz of Texas back onto the show. Senator Cruz, as always, sir, thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry I missed you at CPAC. I heard you gave a great speech. And I'm going to play something from Madam Jen Psaki, which I regard as one of the 5 dumbest things I've heard in the past year, which is saying a lot, as you know. I just want you to hear this again and let our viewers hear this. Hang on a moment, please.
The Keystone Pipeline was not processing oil through the system. That does not solve any problems. That's a misdiagnosis, or maybe a misdiagnosis of what needs to happen. I would also note that on oil leases, what this actually justifies, in President Biden's view, is the fact that we need to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, on oil in general, and we need to look at other ways of having energy in our country and others.
So, Senator, aside from, it's really quite remarkable to hear her say that. But, one question I have is, so that's what Germany did. That's pretty much what Europe did. They threw away fossil fuels. Now they're all dependent on Russia. And here we are at this catastrophe. What do you make of this? You think Biden has the wherewithal to announce changes in his fossil fuel policy at the State of the Union tomorrow?
Unfortunately, I don't. Biden and his political apparatchiks made clear their objectives were to embrace the Green New Deal. And what they want to do is destroy domestic energy production. They want to shut down domestic oil production, shut down domestic natural gas. And sadly, they've had far too much success doing so. Literally, the first week in office, Joe Biden shuts down the Keystone Pipeline. The first week in office, Joe Biden suspends new leases on federal lands, suspends new offshore leases. And so we see gas prices skyrocketing. And, the Biden White House acts as if the laws of supply and demand don't operate, that when you reduce supply and demand goes up, one thing always happens, which is prices go up and up and up and up. And if Jen Psaki is right that their goal was to reduce reliance on foreign sources of oil, then they're a miserable failure, because under Joe Biden, we are much more reliant today on foreign sources of oil than we were when he arrived. And that sadly was by design. They are destroying American jobs and replacing them with Russian jobs and Middle Eastern jobs. And that's not good for America or for the world.
Yeah, right now, as I'm sure you know, Biden has put sanctions on the United States fossil fuel sector.
Yes.
So you've got FERC, no drilling on federal lands. The Interior Department, no drilling on federal lands. The Energy Department is freezing 6 applications for LNG exports. Then you've got the SEC firing them up. And now you've got a possible appointment to the Federal Reserve. We basically, besides the Keystone Pipeline and Anwar, doing everything we can to play into Putin's long-run hands. Yep. I don't know what's going to happen in the short run, but there's no change here, and that's what blows my mind.
No, that's absolutely right, Larry. And the important thing to understand, this is also not about the environment. If you judge the Biden administration on only one criterion, let's say you're a zealot, so you don't care about jobs, you don't care about inflation, you don't care about anything except the environment. Judged on that criterion, the Biden administration is an abysmal failure, because what they've done is significantly reduce U.S. oil and gas production and significantly increase our reliance on foreign production. And the foreign production is dirtier, it pollutes more, and it produces more carbon. So congratulations, Green New Deal. You're polluting the world more. And on top of that, you're destroying jobs in America and making inflation hard for working families all across the country. It's an absolute failure, even on its own terms. It's driven really by this zealotry, by this almost religious fervor that oil and gas is bad and they want to destroy jobs at home. And damned if they know what we'll do in their place. But apparently pixie dust will make jet airplanes run.
For months and months and months, you have argued to restore the pipeline, to restore the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I know you got a couple Democratic votes. Can you get a vote? Do you need another vote? Now, Biden has gone ahead and done it, but I think you're looking for a permanent, which I think is the right solution, so that Germany finally opens up some LNG terminals. The two kind of go together. Can you get a vote on that finally, Senator Cruz?
Well, I hope so. We should see bipartisan cooperation. Sadly, for a year, I've been predicting what we're seeing on the 6 o'clock news right now, that Russia would invade Ukraine, that we would see Russian tanks in the streets of Kiev. And this is the result of Joe Biden's catastrophic failures. Really, two things produce this horrific invasion that's playing out right now. Number one, Biden's disastrous surrender and withdrawal in Afghanistan, giving Afghanistan over to the Taliban. Every enemy of America looked at the United States and took the measure of the man in the Oval Office, and they determined, sadly, that Joe Biden was weak and feckless and ineffective, and it made them far more aggressive. I said at the time, the chances of Russia invading Ukraine just increased tenfold, and sadly, the chances of China invading Taiwan increased tenfold. But then secondly, specific to Russia and Ukraine, what you just referenced, which is we had bipartisan agreement in Congress on sanctioning the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I authored those sanctions. I wrote them. We saw overwhelming bipartisan support in Congress for those sanctions. President Trump signed those sanctions into law, and when he did so, Putin stopped constructing the pipeline literally the day that President Trump signed my sanctions legislation into law. Joe Biden came into the White House, waived those sanctions, gave Putin a multi-billion-dollar gift, and that is why we are seeing this invasion of Ukraine, because Biden thought weakness and surrender, that appeasement would somehow stop Russia. Now, finally, reluctantly, the Biden White House has been dragged into doing what I've been pressing them for a year to do, which is they have temporarily imposed sanctions on Nord Stream 2. But Larry, Putin doesn't believe these are real, doesn't believe they're credible. And what Congress needs to do is take up sanctions legislation this week that makes clear that the sanctions on Nord Stream 2 are permanent and irreversible, and that takes away Joe Biden's ability to surrender to Putin as he's been doing for the past year.
You know, I'm not sure people understand the way you do the issue of war finance. Yep. Putin's only industry is energy. I mean, that's all, you know, yes. Remember John McCain said it's an old gas station masquerading as a country. So go back, 2008, oil gets to 150, and he takes over Georgia. Okay, then in 2014, oil goes to 100 plus, and he takes Crimea. And now here in 2021, because Biden has shut down fossil fuels to a great extent, oil goes back to 100, and he goes into Ukraine. How long can we let this go on without the public understanding and the administration and getting a change in laws and whatever it's going to take? I know the cavalry's coming in November. We can't keep feeding Putin's war machine by not producing oil and gas. This has to change.
Well, Larry, you're absolutely right. And if you look at what the Biden administration has done with regard to Russia, at every stage it's been too little, too late. So for a year, they waived sanctions on Nord Stream 2 and gave Putin the green light to invade Ukraine. Now, in the wake of the invasion, they were pressed to act, so they finally imposed sanctions on Nord Stream 2. But as I said, Putin doesn't find them credible. And they've had now several tranches of sanctions, but two things are critical. Number one, they still haven't fully and forcefully sanctioned the Central Bank of Russia. Instead, they've been doing mostly symbolic sanctions. And number two, what sanctions they have on the Central Bank of Russia explicitly exempt energy. It is absolutely indefensible. As you noted, Putin's major source of revenue, the way he is financing the invasion of Ukraine, is through selling oil and gas. And what does the Biden White House do? It exempts oil and gas from the sanctions. That is indefensible, and we ought to put sanctions where it hurts, not in a way designed to keep allowing Putin to conquer and subjugate a sovereign nation, Ukraine, that is a friend of ours, that wants to stand with America, that wants to stand with Europe. And Biden is surrendering Ukraine to Russia right now. It's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, if we don't stop him, he's going to Lithuania. Lord knows where he's going. He wants to break everything in two. Senator, last point. The regulators are killing us on energy.
Yes.
I mentioned the Interior Department, I mentioned the Energy Department, I mentioned FERC, I mentioned the SEC, I mentioned the Federal Reserve, unless you all can stop this crazy Raskin appointment. Is there some way you can invoke a regulatory rule-making legislation to stop all this? Because that's the silent way. They can't get it through the BBB, and they can't get it through actual legislation, but they're killing our energy business through the regulatory route.
Well, you're exactly right. And the way they're approaching destroying oil and gas is not just through the agencies that have direct regulatory authority, agencies like FERC, which actually have some authority over energy. They're trying to abuse every source of government power. So they're trying to use the SEC. They're trying to use the Federal Reserve. They want to destroy domestic energy production, and they don't care if gas goes to $5 a gallon or $10 a gallon. That is a necessary price for appeasing the zealots. You know what's amazing? You think back to 2 years ago, Joe Biden, when he was campaigned as a moderate. He campaigned as a centrist. I got to tell you, the policies we're seeing right now are no different than if Bernie Sanders had been elected. He surrendered to the radical left, and the American people are paying the price. And it's on every metric. I got to say, Larry, you would think that just out of dumb luck, they could have gotten some policy right. But between spending and debt and inflation, between the chaos at our southern border, between abusive and illegal vaccine mandates, between radicals on the courts, and then you look abroad to disastrous foreign policy, they have managed to screw up every single policy issue on the plate. And I got to say, the American people are really paying the price for the radical extremism that sadly has taken over the Democratic Party.
Sir, as I said at CPAC, the cavalry's coming. Save America. I just ask you to keep leading the cavalry, and we will save America. Senator Cruz, thank you, sir. You've been great to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry.